All right, everybody, it's 10 and we have a lot to cover, so I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Welcome and thanks for taking time out of your day. I know everyone is super busy, and I think that this is going to be a really good and productive session. My name is Jennifer. I'm from the Maine Small Business Development Centers. The Maine SBDC provides no-cost confidential business advising to business owners just like yourselves throughout the state of Maine. As an FYI, this is being recorded and you will get the recording, the slides, and all presentation follow-up after this session, probably tomorrow. We're going to keep all of you on mute for the session. There's going to be a decent amount of us, and it just makes for a better presentation if we can kind of keep everybody muted and get through the material in a seamless way. That said, we are taking questions and we do want to encourage you to put those right into the chat, and we're going to get to as many of those as we can. We'll try to stick around toward the end to answer those individual questions as best we can, considering the situation. I do want to kind of give us a heads up. This is a very sensitive issue. I shouldn't say sensitive. Sensitive is probably not the right word. It's a politicized issue, and there are a lot of opinions, and there's a lot flowing out there. That's not the focus of this session. While we'll talk a little bit about that stuff, this session is going to focus on what each of us can do as individuals in our own businesses right now to kind of navigate the situation. So while we encourage you guys to chat, we want to keep it positive and constructive. Please do no negativity. This is not the forum. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our first kind of lead presenter here. Allison Lane is a business advisor here at the SBDC, and she's joined by several of our other business advisors who are here as backup in case we have any questions we can't answer directly. But go ahead, take it away, Allison.
Morning, everyone. Thanks for hopping on. As Jen said, I'm Allie Lane, business advisor. I'm joined by Brandon McDonald, who's going to speak in a little bit, and then we've got some of our colleagues on the line as well who are going to chime in if y'all have questions that we cannot appropriately answer. So thank you for hopping on today. Let's get started. I think Jen pretty much covered this, that we're going to record this, send it to you after. Feel free to put questions in the chat. I'm hoping we're going to have about 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. I got a lot of material to cover, so hopefully we do. If not, we'll try to follow up to address your questions. And as Jen said, I'll just reiterate, we're here to be constructive. We don't want to debate. We don't want to talk politics. It's not because we're ignoring the politics behind this, but Brandon and I are business advisors meant to help you run and operate a successful business. We're not politicians, we're not lobbyists, we don't have any more political influence than you all do. So here to be constructive, so please try to keep questions in the chat constructive, things that you can do. I always like to say focus on what you can control, so that's what we're going to do today. That being said, we're going to start by talking a little bit about our current labor situation and how we got here. So I understand there's a lot of debate when I say the term labor shortage. A lot of people say we don't have a labor shortage, and that's fine. Again, that's something we're not going to debate today. So I realize the name of the webinar probably should have been something about let's talk about the labor situation, but whatever, it is what it is. So let's talk about how we got into our current situation. So the labor issues right now they existed before COVID, and they've been exacerbated by the pandemic. So it's not something new, but it's definitely worse now. And we're going to talk a bit about the future outlook about where we're heading. First, one of the big things that's a contributor to labor issues right now is the availability of childcare. So in an article in the Portland Press Herald last month, I read that over 170 daycares have closed since the start of the pandemic, and 81% of those that are still open have less spots. So, single parents or two working parents can't both get a job if they have children to take care of at home. So that's a contributor to a shortage of labor. That being said, also availability of housing, I think particularly of Bar Harbor. So the town of Bar Harbor has considered regulating the conversion of year-round rental properties to vacation rentals because affordable housing can't keep up with the increases in the population. So that is an issue. Along with that, we're seeing a lot less foreign workers and foreign students coming to Maine to work. This is because of COVID regulations on travel, backlogged visa process, general concern for safety, some people still just not wanting to travel. Hits the tourism industry really hard. I just read an article the other day that Funtown Splashtown in 2019 employed 110 foreign students, and this year they're only expecting to see about 40 or 50. So big difference there. Hotels see this, especially in tourism-rich areas like Old Orchard Beach, really struggling to with the foreign workers not able to or willing to come to Maine. Meanwhile, although we're seeing a lot of folks vaccinated, a lot more comfort of people going out in public, there is still general health and safety concerns because of COVID. Still a lot of immunocompromised folks and parents whose kids are not vaccinated who aren't comfortable going out. So that's a big thing. Some people are just still not comfortable returning to a conventional workplace. Maine is the oldest state in the country, and a lot of people took COVID as a good opportunity to retire a bit early. We are going to talk then a little bit about how retirees aren't necessarily out of the workforce and can certainly be an asset employers can use, but still the aging population is a contributing factor. Ability to work remote. So it's a pretty sweet deal for a recent college graduate, get a job working remotely out of their home in northern Maine, working for a company out of California. Definitely decreases workers in Maine if they can work remotely from Maine, but work for a company outside of Maine. And of course, I won't ignore the unemployment issue. A lot of folks argue that the additional benefits to unemployment are a major contributor to the workforce shortage. So we're not going to ignore that. It's probably, of all of these causes on the screen, it's probably what we have the least control over. So that's why we're not digging into it too much, although we are going to talk in a second about the outlook of that unemployment. And I will just mention that the first sort of step in the right direction, the state did reinstate the search for work requirement, I believe last month, I may be wrong. So that was a good step in the right direction. And actually just yesterday, a new program was announced. So we're going to talk about that in a second too. So again, since unemployment is such a hot ticket item on this topic, we'll acknowledge it. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, this is for the whole country, as of last month, the rate was 5.8%, which is the lowest unemployment rate since the start of the pandemic. You can see on the screen that the peak was in April of 2020 when we were just shy of 15%. So that's a good sign. We are headed in the right direction. You're going to hear me say that several times over these next couple slides. And then talking about the state of Maine, our current unemployment rate, well, I say current, as of April of 2021, 4.8%. And the average unemployment rate between 2000 and 2021 was 5.1%. So we're actually below that average, which is nice. So let's talk just for a second about the market outlook. So according to the Department of Labor, as of just about a week ago, nearly 7 out of 10 net job losses have been recovered as a result of the pandemic, or as a result of recovering from the pandemic. So that's good. We're getting there, but the Department of Labor is also projecting a loss of nearly 16,000 jobs in the next 7 years. So again, this was a trend. Less labor to keep up with the amount of jobs was a trend before the pandemic. It's been exacerbated by the pandemic, but it's not something brand new. And it's something that we're going to talk about, things that you can actively be doing to deal with it. And it may not be the things that you're thinking of, like raising wages. It's different solutions to that. That's why we're here today. And then just yesterday, this Maine's Back to Work program was announced. I'm not going to talk a lot about it because it's brand new and I haven't had a chance to dig into it, but you'll receive this presentation and recording of the webinar after. So you will be able to click the links in the slides, including a link to the press release and a link to a webinar. So you might not get this in time to attend the webinar today at 2 p.m. You can find it on the DECD's website if you want to attend it today, or you can probably, I plan to watch the recording because I can't make it at 2 p.m. today. But anyway, what this program is, it's basically a state initiative to pay people to return to work. folks can get up to $1,500 one time if they come off unemployment, go back to work for 8 weeks, basically. It's a very high level description of it, just to give you an idea. And that was just announced yesterday, so something brand new. So shifting gears, we're done talking now about where we're at, the market outlook, the market conditions. Again, we don't have a lot of control over those things. So now we're going to talk about 3 different sort of avenues to solving the labor issue within your business today. We're going to talk about hiring different people. We're going to talk about hiring people from different places or marketing to potential workers in different places. And we're also going to talk about combating the issue from a different angle. So you can't find the people, so how do you make your operations more efficient to deal with that? So I'm going to pass it over to Brandon to get us started in talking about hiring folks that you wouldn't typically think of to hire. So take it away, Brandon.
Thank you. Yeah, so we're going to go through just a couple of these terms, and I wanted to go into just enough detail, but again, as Allison said at the end of this, if there's something that really sticks out to you and you want to learn more about it, the one that comes to me is usually independent contractors. There's a lot of rules with that one, and maybe a business advisor can help you navigate some of that. So let's begin. So when it comes to a situational, temporary labor, maybe seasonal labor, the temp workforce is able to help. Don't be afraid to talk to your local temp office and ask them flat out what is competitive for the temp world right now. They're very honest for the most part. They'll tell you exactly what that market's looking like. Again, it's probably going to be a little bit more to hire a temp than it would be to find someone yourself and pay them whatever you're currently offering. Usually temp benefits end up adding up to a little bit more than what a traditional employee would be. There's actually workforce development boards that are commissioned to trying to take care of the workforce challenges we have right now. And so the 3 that come to mind right now, there's the Northeastern Workforce Development Board. They take care of Hancock all the way to Aroostook. The Central Western Maine Development Board, they're Somerset to Oxford. And then if you're on the coastal regions from like York to Waldo, that's going to be the Coastal Counties Workforce Development Board. And they have their own pools of funding that they utilize to create certain programs. So some of these are actually through those workforce development boards. And the one that comes to mind right now is through an initiative that's been going on for the past couple of years, and that is the recovery-friendly employer initiatives. So being a person in recovery, there is some federal, some local, some state dollars available to employers. Something along the lines of maybe a paid training opportunity. So 6 months on the job training paid by a workforce development board or a community action program, some kind of partner that has joined up to try and tackle the workforce problem. Sometimes there are actually paid salary options. So in Aroostook County, there's actually 6 months of training and then another 6 months of on the job salary available to employers, and whether that's at a 50 or 100% match. So if you're hiring someone at $15 an hour, a workforce development partner will pay $7.50 of that individual's pay for 6 months, along with that initial full 100% of their training, that onboarding for this first 6 month period. Most of them will also train you on how to become an employer, folks in recovery, a substance abuse workplace, to make sure that you're recovery friendly. You want to make sure that you're offering a safe workplace for those employees. Moving on, so there's folks with mental illness, sometimes workforce development boards. So again, I'm from Aroostook County. I work with organizations in Aroostook County, but most of the time these are going to be hosted through whoever your workforce development board provider is going to be. So that's probably going to be a contact, whether it's Northeastern, Central Western. But typically they'll partner up with someone who works in the mental health field. They'll try to work with job placement. And again, there's a lot of similar benefits to a recovery-friendly workplace, whether that's a paid training opportunity. So again, some organization will pay the training of the individual. As long as you're able to get certified through a workforce development board or a mental health organization, they'll also help with some on-the-job salary needs. So again, just looking at someone who'd be a little bit unconventional. Sometimes if you have a job that can fit the needs of these demographics, it's awesome to work with a community action partner, or workforce development partner to figure out how to place someone into a role at your workplace. Independent contractors, so you're seeing this rise of Uber and DoorDash. The key with maintaining what the IRS wants to see for independent contractors, so you cannot govern two major things along with a host of other rules. So you have to make sure that you're not telling them what will be done and how it will be done. So really your goal as the employer is just to care about the end result. You know, in the case of DoorDash, that the food gets to the individual at the end of the day. Or for Uber, a person goes from point A to point B, gets there safely. You don't care about what happens in the middle. So as long as you have no say over what happens in the middle, you know, there's an opportunity to become an employer that has independent contractors working under them. Has independent contractors who are working for themselves. Really, the key with that is making sure that you fit all of the IRS guidance for an independent contractor. And trust me, they do look into this. They want to make sure that employers are not trying to get out of benefits by going through the independent workforce. Interns, so Maine still has no rules on, well, very lax rules on unpaid interns. So you can still offer unpaid internships. There's a lot of rules with this that have been relaxed over the past couple of years, and now it focuses a lot more on ensuring that you're not displacing a job by taking on an intern. You're ensuring that it stems around their academics, it meets their calendar, so you really should not be taking interns through the summer calendar unless that coincides with summer classwork. Making sure that if it's unpaid, that there's some kind of course credit or college benefit. So if you don't think this is something that could benefit the individual going through, you know, the rest of their professional life, I would not go down the road of internships. An unpaid internship, that's kind of like this holy grail now. A lot of big employers are actually going the paid internship route. So it becomes increasingly difficult to find a quality unpaid intern going forward. So just keep that in mind. And if you think that you could meet the needs of an intern, I'd say work with a educational institution. You know, big intern providers are going to be your Hudson University, your UMaine, your smaller private schools along the coast. Ensuring that you contact with them, network with them, explain that you're interested in working with interns. And so really, you got to look at trying to find these non-conventional people through means that you're probably not already looking at. So you're going to look at a job board, you're going to work with a career center, but it's a good idea to also work with what we call community partners. So these are going to be your community action programs, your Penquist out of Bangor, your ACAP out of Aroostook County. They are the ones who work with the recovery-friendly workforces, mental health, workforce programs. There's agencies on aging, so that's probably where you're going to work with retirees. Sometimes they get the contracts for AARP, retiree-friendly workplaces, or business startup opportunities. So really, it's good to network outside of that hiring board, job board, career center. You know, the schools, the local schools, if you're looking for high school students, UMaine, if you're going to be going down the internship route, just really going outside the box of what a normal employer is going to be looking at to ensure that you can find the biggest pool of applicants possible. Next slide, please. So knowing how to find these individuals, whether, again, you're going back to the Career Center or working with JobLink, there was a period of time where the Department of Health and Human Services actually worked with low-income individuals who were receiving something like temporary assistance for needy families, any kind of assistance programs. They would actually have their own listing of employers that they worked with and did referrals to often. So sometimes that's an opportunity depending on, you know, what your community is like. There's always individuals through public housing authorities that are looking for work opportunities. It's actually a requirement for most public housing places that they have individuals who are either working a set amount of hours or doing some kind of community service. So normally people choose to take some employment. So it's sometimes a good opportunity and then network outside of that traditional mean. So paid referrals, there's unpaid referrals, just depending on you working with a employee setting such a great example that they end up wanting to move, bring someone else, bring a friend on. Then there's the paid referral world where you say, listen, you bring someone in here, we'll give both of you $250, $500 if they stay a year. That works. That's another opportunity where, instead of offering, some people are offering right now $500, $1,000, bonuses to come in. Sometimes it's actually better to offer both the recruiter and the individual the same amount. So $250, $250. And that way you're accessing the pool of what a employee already has. They have family, friends, kids who are looking to get into the workforce, and maybe it's a good idea to work with them to try and find a skilled applicant and utilize their networking to help benefit you. And really, one of the things that we're seeing employers get a little bit more flexible with is that hiring process. So there was a period in time where, you said, I'd only take a walk-in, no phone calls, no emails. We're seeing people emailing a lot more about the job process. You're hearing this issue with childcare, and if you're a flexible employer, if you're able to offer something outside of or inside of school hours or something a little bit unconventional, don't be afraid to open up your hiring process so that it's not just the walk-ins only or no phone calls. I mean, if you can allow someone that ability to contact you, to find out if they're a skilled employee, don't limit yourself by saying only walk-ins at this time of hour. If you're able to open up that job pool, you're going to end up having more qualified candidates contacting you and ensuring that you have the biggest pool available to you, and it's also kind of a benefit. And that's what I had on this one. Allison, do you have anything to add? Okay, I will. So the next part, so just as you need to sell your service, your product to a customer, as the workforce gets a little bit more competitive, it's important to sell that job as well. So it's good to offer this call of action to your employees. Whether that's another employee saying, listen, this is incredible, I love working here, the work-life balance is awesome. If that's not something that you're able to do through your workplace, then sometimes just getting a one-on-one, if you've got someone taking over a machine shift, and you can have someone else explain it and say, listen, this is what the expectation is going to be. I love, what I've done here. Sometimes it's great to have that 15-year, 20-year veteran of your business come on and explain to someone, this is why I've stuck with this company so long. I've had a lot of flexibility here. Really having someone like that as a part of your hiring committee, the team that's going to be working with getting those people into those shoes of what's needed at your workplace. That's really going to be key, and getting building the rapport with someone to make sure that they take a very necessary spot in your workforce. And so now you're seeing these perks that I remember 5 years ago, the holy grail of the software or the white collar world was being able to work from home. And now you're seeing, 50% of employers at one point were trying, if it was a bank, if it was the insurance world, you had the opportunity to work from home. It was a great opportunity. And now it's becoming this perk where, well, I'm going to take a workcation. I'm going to take a staycation. I'm going to go to the beach. I'm going to let my family have fun, and I'm going to be doing some work on the way. Is that okay? Yes. All right. You're seeing a lot more employers get comfortable with the idea of allowing their employees to work from home, having that ability to be trusted a little bit more with the company time. And as long as the job gets done, that's a great opportunity. And it's viewed almost, at one time it was a perk, it was that holy grail. Now it's becoming a lot more common. So it's important to keep in mind that if that job has the potential to be done from home, keep in mind that it be viewed as a perk to the employee. We're seeing these things like housing allowance, relocation allowances. As Maine's trying to figure out how to deal with our workforce shortage, you're seeing other organizations say, well, I will bring in a qualified individual from New York, Vermont, New Hampshire. And so it's going to be important for you to sit down and say, if you want someone to move to a region for you, really you should be looking at what you're able to do for them, and realize that a larger corporate business is going to be offering that relocation, that housing assistance, sometimes childcare assistance. So In order to stay competitive, it's important to understand what a competitor is offering for a higher skilled employee. Unfortunately, it feels like it's almost, gone are those days of having the employees without vacation time or at a lower salary, just because the corporate world is able to match the needs and offer benefits that really, that's what we saw for mid-level employees, the paid vacation time, 401k matching, things that were really for higher skilled employees 5, 10, 15 years ago. It's now going for that entry level employee. So just keeping that in mind when you're trying to sell that job. And that is all I had.
So I was on a really interesting webinar the other day that talked a lot about referrals, like Brandon just talked about on our last slide. So both getting your high performing employees to give referrals, but also getting your customers to give referrals. And this webinar really, really harped on the fact that you can't just ask people, do you know anyone? Because I mean, if somebody comes to you and says, do you know anybody? Your brain is just in 50 different places. It's like, well, yeah, I know a lot of people. But if you start asking the question more specifically, so if you're targeting the question to get people thinking in the right direction, you're going to get much better answers. So you may think you're limiting sort of the pool of answers, but you're actually helping influence the quality of answers and the chance of getting any answers at all. So instead of saying, do you know anybody, say, do you know anybody who wants something to do on the weekends, or who likes to be outside on the weekends and would like a job working outside? Or do you know anybody at, do you know anybody at church that may be looking for work? Do you know anybody at your kids' high school, any of your kids' friends that need extra money to help pay for gas in their car? So be specific when you ask the do you know anybody question. Don't just say, do you know anybody? Which leads me to my next point. So if any of you have been in any of my marketing webinars, you may have even seen this exact slide. And you've heard me harp a lot on you about target market, how if you cast a wide net, people tend to think that having a product for everyone and anyone is a good thing, but casting a wide net, it isn't necessarily. It's expensive to do that, try to reach a lot of people, but it also doesn't allow your customers to feel like you're talking directly to them. It's the same way as when you ask, do you know anybody? It's too broad. So shifting the way you think right now. So instead of thinking about your customer target market, think about your target employees. So again, this is the same situation. It's your most likely, most loyal employees. It's the easy employees to get through your door. And hopefully, along with being the easy employees that come to work for you, it's also the employees that do the best job. So maybe it is high school students. If you're a fast food restaurant, that's often what it is. Maybe it's retirees. Maybe you found 2 of your top performing employees from the same place. So maybe they have other friends, or maybe there are other people in the same place that you can find. So don't be afraid to keep pulling from that same labor pool if it's working from you. And a way to start to figure out who your target employees are. So again, go back, and I know this is not helpful if you don't already have employees, if you're looking to hire your first employee, or maybe you have a couple, but they're not real high quality. That's you might feel horrible thinking that, but maybe it's the truth. But ask those high performers, why do they work for you? What is it about it? And I mean, yes, they need a paycheck to pay their bills. Okay, but why are they getting their paycheck from you, especially when there's a ton of other jobs out there right now? And I gotta give credit to this webinar that I watched the other day, the one that talked a lot about referrals, because this next question I didn't come up with. But ask them, what's one thing that would make them leave? So what is one thing that you could do? Obviously, if you took away their paycheck or gave them a paycheck, but what else? What's one thing that you could do that would make them leave? Maybe they're working remote, and one thing you could do is make them come back to the office. You never know. So shifting gears again. Oh, and I do just want to add, I read this interesting quote online. It said, you don't want to waste time putting content on TikTok if your market is senior citizens who don't own a computer. So why are you throwing money at the employee who's about to leave because their boss doesn't respect them or because they're bored? So sometimes raising the wages is not always the answer, is what that quote was getting at. So let's talk a little bit about retention, as obviously the objective, I want to go out and find new employees who are quality, but you also, maybe you already have some employees. And so you need to hold on to them for dear life if they're good employees right now. Basic pre-K stuff. but we forget the basics, especially right now, we're all in sort of pandemic panic. So let's just to reiterate the basics. How do you keep your employees? You listen to them, you respond to them and respond to their needs. So acknowledge that you're listening to them, show them respect and support them. I mean, 4 very basic things, but I urge you to just take a look at those 4 things and think, are there any of those 4 things that I am weak on right now? Maybe you were good at it before, but now things have been crazy with the pandemic. Where's your weak spot there? So one good thing to figure out, what is actually important to your employees. You know, we've talked a lot about pay. So I actually was reading in the Bangor Daily the other day, just this year, they did a survey. They had 32 respondents and only 7 of them and they were surveying folks who'd left the hospitality industry. So we're talking about a specific industry here, but only 7 of the 32 respondents, only about 20%, said that they might consider returning to work if they were offered higher wages or more regular hours. So only 20% said they'd come back if they were offered higher wages or better hours. So that's interesting. It makes you think, well, what else is important to them? What are the other factors? So let's talk about this. Morale. I think that may be the number one. You know, people talk a lot about pay, but enjoying what you do is also pretty important. I put this family environment in here because I was reading another article about breweries. Someone had surveyed a brewery employees and asked why they enjoyed working for them. And their answer was, that's why it's in quotes, was family environment. So that may not be a selling point to new employees because it's often hard to sell the, hey, we're a family, come join the family. But existing employees may really appreciate the relationship. That being said, they may also be sticking around. It may also be important to them to have a quality team or a supervisor that is respectful and understanding to them, treats them well. So those are 3 things that relate to morale that can all be very important to people. Autonomy. So maybe it's important to people to be able to work without feeling like they're being micromanaged. In some industries, this is easier to grant your employees than others, for sure. Cross-training and changing tasks. So I get bored easily. And if I were to answer that question about what's one thing that my company could do that would make me leave, it might have something to do with being bored. So as soon as I get bored, I'm out. So maybe if this is important to your employees, offering them opportunities to learn other positions or offering them opportunities to switch what they do on a daily basis. So, you know, maybe they're on a different, thinking as far as like line cooks in a kitchen, you know, a different spot on the line. So even small things like that. And it doesn't take a lot for things like that. It might not take a lot to train them to do something different, but it can do a lot to keep them from getting bored if they're able to do something different on a daily basis, if it's important to them. Remote work hybrid, Brandon talked a lot about this. Is it important to them to be able to work remotely or work remotely part of the time? Scheduling, again, if you have kids, maybe it's crucial that you get out of work at 2 p.m. every day. Maybe right now your schedule takes you till 4, but is there a way that the hours can be shifted so that your employee can leave at 2 and pick up their kids? Little things like that. Supporting this is a big thing, especially in the retail and food service industry right now. Customers are awful right now. I used to work in food service. I've worked in retail. I know that customer service is a whole different ballgame. And right now it is more intense than ever. And it's not just because places are short staffed, but people are just punchy after the pandemic. I don't know, they're getting out in public again. They forgot their manners. It's awful. So you as an employer should be standing behind your employees if they're dealing with a rude customer. You know, maybe now is not the time to tell you, well, the customer's always right. Like it's often important to employees to feel supported, to feel like you have their back if somebody is rude to them. And along with that, where things are extra punchy right now, they may need some extra breaks, some mental breaks, physical breaks, you know, just a chance to leave the building or a private space to take a deep breath. So keeping in mind, what do people need? Are they close to breaking points and can you prevent that? And then of course, I'm not gonna, you know, act like pay and benefits and bonuses aren't important to people, because they obviously are. But I purposely kind of put it at the bottom of the slide because it's the obvious answer that you think of first. And it's often the one that as small businesses, you can't afford to do too much more than you're already doing. So what's important is you analyze you talk to your employees. So how do you figure out what's important to them? You ask them, talk to them. When I ran my business, I thought that I was pretty in touch with my employees because I worked side by side with them on a daily basis. And I talked to them a lot. We talked a lot of different things, but I never really had structured time where we sat down and I talked to them about things like this. I thought that I would understand it, but it's not necessarily the case. Just because you talk to your employees all the time, sometimes you need to explicitly ask them the question and, offer them some multiple choice, because they might not necessarily know what's important to them until you point it out. Show them this list and say, point to the 3 things that are most important to you. Who knows? So shifting gears, we've talked a lot about where to find people, about hiring some unconventional people, looking in different places, reaching out to different agencies. But now let's talk about efficiency. Talk about doing more with less. And the easiest way to start this conversation is to talk about what not to do. And this may be obvious, but sometimes, like I said earlier, when you're in sort of the pandemic panic, it's easy to forget the basics. Don't burn out your employees. You don't have enough employees. Something needs to give, and it's not employees' energy. That's the fastest way to not retain employees. For both your customers and your employees, don't overpromise and underdeliver. Better to underpromise and overdeliver. We're going to talk a lot in a minute about setting expectations. And don't forget to communicate with both your employees and your customers what's going on. And I put some links here. So a week from tomorrow, I'm hosting a webinar about convincing customers to give you online reviews and how to respond to the good reviews and the bad reviews. So that first link is to register for that webinar. And then I put a couple links to some of our older webinars about customer service. So customer service best practices, Lori Allen did that webinar about a month and a half ago, I think. So it's fresh content. You may think you know everything about customer service, but it's very different right now with the pandemic. And we also, so about a year ago, customer service during a crisis was a webinar that we did. So that is, some of the content's a little outdated. It was very much in the middle of, it was like July of last year, I think, but there is discussion about conflict resolution and dealing with difficult customers. Susan DeGrossier did that webinar. So if you've met her on a webinar, you know she's lovely to listen to. And I think it's only about a 30-minute webinar, so definitely worth a click. So you're like, okay, well, I know what not to do. Thank you, Allie. So let's talk about what you should do. We're going to start with the obvious that I know you may already be doing. Limit your hours or days open. Open later, close earlier. Look at where your revenue is coming from. What are your busy days? Can you close on your quiet days? Maybe you're and I'm going to use a lot, I always preface this disclaimer, but my background is food service, so I use a lot of food service examples in these webinars. Maybe you are maybe your restaurant's open for lunch, dinner, and bar service. And dinner and bar service where you make your most money, and you're able to look back at your books and see that that's where most of your revenue comes from. That's what your claim to fame is. Maybe you close for lunch entirely, but you offer your customers an alternative. So maybe you work with some of your neighbor restaurants and say, hey, we're not open for lunch this summer, but you should really go down the road and check out so-and-so. And it's totally, it's a competitor. It is a competitor, but you're working with them. And maybe you work out a deal with them so that when their customers at lunch ask them about dinner, bar service, they send them to you. So it's a little bit of collaboration with your neighbors. Everybody's in this together. Everybody's struggling for that same labor pool. So instead of competing, maybe you can collaborate, form some meaningful relationships. And then you may also need to cut back on product and service offerings. So for the longest time, a lot of places were only offering, online sales or takeout or delivery. They weren't offering anything in person. That can still be a thing. Just because you can open your doors doesn't mean you necessarily should. I know I've seen a lot of places that they're drive-through only, delivery only, takeout only. They're not doing anything in person. Maybe now's the time to focus on your website, really offering, answering questions on the website so people don't have to ask you in the store and spend your time asking you those questions. Maybe you're selling more online. Little things, so maybe you're no longer offering custom orders. Maybe you've shrunk your menu of services or products, so to speak, so that it's only your top performing items. You might be surprised when you trim the fat of what you're offering. You might get some people to, oh, I really like that you're really obscure offering, but it's not bringing in the most of your revenue. And right now you have limited resources to work with. Little things. So if you are a hotel, maybe you're requiring earlier checkout, which instead of letting them check out at 11, you're asking them to check out by 9:30. It's a little bit of a pain, but if, like you said earlier, if you communicate it right, it might have to happen. Maybe you have a prepackaged continental breakfast so that you don't have to hire folks to serve it. If you're a restaurant, maybe I stole this idea from another webinar the other day, but maybe you're leaving a water pitcher on the table so your wait staff doesn't have to come refill the water, 3 times before your meal comes. So little things like that, realizing, keeping in mind what's important to your customers. What are the things that if you did take it away, your customer is going to be really irritated, but what are those little things that you might be able to take away and, communicate it? You're not trying to be sneaky, but it is what it is. And so along with this, setting realistic expectations, communicating it broadly, both to your employees and to your customers. And so that being said, we're in survival mode here. Let's be honest, sacrifices have to happen. And this is, remember, we talked about where to possibly find employees, but this is sort of where, okay, you know what? I don't have enough labor. I'm trying to hire. I'm looking in the places Brandon told me to look in. I'm posting to different sites and I'm networking in different places, but I'm short staffed. So instead of burning out your employees, you have to kind of put yourself into survival mode, figure out what's important to your customers and trim the fat from there. What else can you do? I talked a little bit about partnerships a minute ago. So working with your neighbors, if you can't offer somebody something, is there a substitute that one of your neighbors can provide, even if it's a competitor? Substitutes help them out if you're encouraging DIY. So instructional videos, maybe you're a landscaping company and you can't take on more clients, but you can sell ready to plant kits or instructions about here are the veggies and flowers that I put along your property. So things that require a lot less of your time, but you can still please your customer and you're not necessarily charging as much for it. You got to be fair here, but it's something to continue to stay on people's radar, even when you can't fully satisfy their demand. And these things that I'm suggesting, sometimes they take a lot more work up front, but in the long term, they're going to pay off because they're going to reward you over and over again without requiring additional labor. And if you remember back to 25 minutes ago at the beginning of the webinar, when I pointed out that this labor issue is recovering, but it's going to be a problem for a long time. We're still losing those jobs over the next 7 years, according to the Department of Labor. So this is not a problem that's going away. So it may be worth investing some of your time right now and figuring out some of these solutions to be more efficient. Talk a little bit about signage because I keep harping on about communication. You've probably seen some of these signs around, basically reminding customers that, hey, we're short staffed, like, please go easy on us, we're trying. And it seems like such a simple thing to put a sign on your door, but it's because it is, but it means a lot. I know for me, walking into a place, the first thing I do now is I look for the mask policy on the door. And you don't want your customers to be uncomfortable for any reason. You want them to know walking in what to expect. So a simple sign on the door communicating things about your mask policy, but also things about, hey, look, we're vulnerable. Please, give us a minute. We're trying. Just kind of reminds customers that this is a thing that's happening. Now, what not to do, be professional. So I've seen some of these signs that get kind of sassy and say like, nobody showed up today or nobody wants to work. That just rubs me the wrong way as a consumer. And maybe it's part of your marketing, your brand, that you're a little bit sassy, but just be professional. Don't let your emotions come out in these signs. And maybe it's just personal preference, but I don't enjoy going to places when I feel like they're being defensive in this sense. So that's why I've crossed out the part of the sign that I don't approve of and would recommend not using. So another thing, automation, it's kind of been an ugly word. It's had a bad rep for a while, but there are things that you're not necessarily stealing jobs, so to speak, if you do some automation. You can automate your inventory, reservation system. So Facebook messaging you've probably seen where you can set it up to automatically respond to certain questions, or people can click pre-written questions. Maybe you've amped up your website FAQs so people can, answering questions like that is automated. Ordering kiosks in restaurants. I'd encourage you to ask fellow business owners, ask your competitors, ask your neighbors, ask your friends what they use. And that being said, I'm not necessarily endorsing these apps and products. I'm not endorsing them. I just picked some examples to give you, but this doesn't necessarily mean I'm saying use these. You can certainly talk to one of us, business advisor, about what we found our clients to find successful in the past. So we're happy to talk to you about that. But these are just examples here. Outsourcing, just like automation, outsource is kind of one of those, it leaves people with a bad taste in their mouth. But we're not necessarily talking about outsourcing your jobs out of state or out of the country. We're talking about hiring your local bookkeeper or hiring your local digital marketing agency to help take some of the weight off of your in-house staff. And you have to kind of look at your budget, what you can afford to do. So maybe you can't afford a digital marketer to start and run your website and social media. Maybe you can't afford that, but maybe you can afford an answering service to take some of your calls and weed out the ones that you don't need to talk to, weed out the spam calls. So outsourcing can help take the weight off of your in-house staff. And of course, now is not the time to be too proud to ask friends and family for help, whether it's physical labor or help with some of sort of the outsourcing activities. Don't be afraid to ask those people for help, which should go without saying, but it's amazing how many of my clients, they have a great resource, and they don't want to ask for help because we're all proud entrepreneurs. So we're not digging into this today. We're passing the buck on this question for another day, but I do want to acknowledge, because I get the question a lot, is I need help, but I can't afford to hire help. This doesn't mean, this isn't the problem we're addressing today, but if you have too much demand and you can't afford to hire help, or you can't afford to outsource any of those operations like your bookkeeping and your marketing, you do have a pricing or cost structure issue. Your issue is not necessarily the labor shortage. Your issue is something internal. So you're spending too much money on your overhead, or your prices aren't high enough. That's the one I see the most. And a colleague said to me when she said, if you can't keep up with demand, your prices aren't high enough. And it's kind of interesting in a way. If you have too much demand, basic economics. So what I'm saying here, we're not going to dig into this today because it's a topic for a whole other webinar, but talk to a business advisor about doing financial projections to figure out where the problem is if you can't afford to keep up with your demand. So to close, important things. This is the part where if you've listened to nothing we've said so far, hear these things. You're not alone. Everybody's struggling with the market. And I'm not saying this as a way of saying, don't complain because everyone's struggling. That's not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the business next door that you think is doing so well is having the same issues. We're all struggling together. And maybe we can start setting a collective standard for our customers within certain industries to expect different things from people. Again, set realistic expectations. So under promise and over deliver. Be patient with your rude customers right now. And heavy on the communication, signage, online communication, in person, keeping up with social media posts, emails, websites, really just over communicate because it is okay to be human and vulnerable right now. It's okay to tell people, hey, look, we're doing the best we can. But keep it professional. Try to keep your sass and emotion, under wraps a little bit, but let people know where you stand and that you're trying and you've made a few sacrifices, but you're doing the best you can in a struggling market. So that's all we have for content on this last page. How to contact us. Again, we'll be emailing you this presentation, so you'll have access to all of the links you saw throughout the presentation. And of course, you can always reach out to us directly and you'll be connected to the business advisor in your region to talk specifically about your situation. So I'm going to stop sharing and we'll check out the chat. And we've got, oh, hey, look at that. We've got about 10 minutes to talk about questions in the chat. So bear with me for a second.
So Allison, your first question before you could probably answer it. Do you know what is contributing to the 16,000 job loss? And I'm not sure if that's related to the DOL long-term 7-year report, or if that's the COVID, response, like people who haven't come back from there.
So I believe that number came from pre-COVID analysis. So the state did a report comparing 2018 jobs to 2028, what they expect. I actually had a slide in here that broke it down by industry sector, and I can send you that. But so I think it was pre-COVID analysis. So as far as what's contributing to it, I think it's the causes that you would have seen on that slide, things like aging workforce, availability of skilled workers and whatnot. So that's not a super satisfying answer, but I do think it was from pre-COVID analysis when they were comparing 2018 labor market to 2028 across a variety of sectors.
And you kind of, this is not actually a question that was put in the chat, but it could be, the cost for business owners for shipping, for their cost of goods has gone up. And, with this increase potentially in cost for employees, do you have any, this is basic suggestions on what they might do to kind of navigate those additional costs that they're taking on while also being kind of not being able to meet the demand? And I think you did cover this, but I kind of want you to reiterate it.
So to me, it sort of becomes I hate to do financial projections to figure out how to line up the numbers. Any of my colleagues on the call want to offer some insight on that one?
I think you kind of covered it when you said, take a look at your pricing. Are you pricing high enough? And that might not be, just look at your overall financials are probably going to be very helpful there. It looks like most of our other questions were either answered in the chat or they were conversational pieces. Is there any other questions that you guys had for our team of business advisors here? Feel free to put them in the chat at this point.
And I appreciate some of the questions were being answered in the chat. I often, when I go on these webinars and I see people answering other people's questions, I sometimes wonder who those people are. So if anybody that's, I see Pete and Edie, for example, if either of you want to introduce yourselves and let people know that, hey, I answered your question in the chat and this is what my role is and why I'm qualified to answer that. I can vouch for them that they are, but if anybody wants to chime in and introduce themselves, go for it. Or put in the chat who you are.
We need to allow her to unmute herself. I don't know how to do that. Let's try that.
As I'm looking and I see that Edie did say who she was too.
Yeah, Allison, just real quick, hi to everyone, that any of the federal delegation offices can help with specific questions about J1 or H-2B visas, and we'd be happy to do so. And I do work for Senator King in Bangor.
And I'm Peter Harriman, the Center Director at the Portland office for the SBDC.
Okay. I think that's the end of our questions. I'm actually kind of shocked. I'm trying to think of questions that I would have, but I also kind of taken it all in. So with that said, I think we'll wrap things up for the day. Thank you guys all for taking the time to join us. And if we can be of any help as you look at your individual situations, please reach out. That's what we're here for. We're here to help you as individual business owners to kind of navigate this. So if you leave here going, I don't know which one of these is right for my business, that's what the SBDC is here for. Please reach out. There will be a link to get connected in the follow-up email, but you can always visit our website at www.maine, spelled out like the state, SBDC.org. And a recording will be sent out as well as the slides with all those links that Allison had in there. All the good stuff will be sent along. So, and again, reach out if you need help. We're here to help. Have a good one, everyone.